anticipation in this room, and it is justified. I mean, we are really privileged to have Dr. Mordecai Ogada today amidst us, and we are really grateful that at such short notice he agreed to come here and present his ideas, his talk. We can't be grateful enough for him. I mean, to him for that. Um, I'll just briefly introduce his work over the last 20 years, mostly in Africa, and then I'll tell briefly about what we'll be talking about, and then leave it to him to take it forward. So Dr. Mordecai Ogada is a carnivore ecologist and conservation writer who has been involved in conservation policy and practice for the last 19 years in Kenya and other parts of Africa, mainly on human-wildlife conflict mitigation and carnivore conservation. Dr. Ogada's professional work has included research and teaching conservation leadership at Colorado State University. Much of his energy has been devoted to the area of community-based conservation, uh, mainly in the field of wildlife policy and wetlands ecology. He has worked for over 15 years in the conservation civil society conservation practice in Kenya. Over the last 3 years, Mordecai has been engaged in examining the policy problems and prejudices that underlie the challenges experienced in wildlife conservation, particularly in Global South. These big issues form the central theme of The Big Conservation Lie, a book focused on Kenya, co-authored with John Baria. He is currently the executive director of Conservation Solutions Africa, a natural resource management consultancy based in Nanyuki. Dr. Ogada is currently consulting for Survival International on conservation and human rights in East and Central Africa. He is in India mainly he gave the plenary yesterday at SCCS. And when I saw that plenary, I remembered what Arundhati Roy had written in the beginning of the introduction to Annihilation of Caste. When I first read it, I'm just quoting her. When I first read it, it felt as if somebody had walked into a dim room and opened the windows. Reading Dr. Bhimraoji Ambedkar bridges the gap between what most Indians are schooled to believe in and the reality that we experience in every day of our lives. So we can just replace the reality with the conservation reality, and it would be same. So once Dr. Ogada starts speaking, we'll realize like what is the true nature of conservation. And this parallel with Arundhati Roy is also, not Arundhati Roy, but rather Bhimrao Ambedkar is very apt, because Bhimrao Ambedkar also during his time challenged the dominant narratives. So when the well-known saint Mahatma Gandhi was talking about how India should be a republic of villages, how each village should be an independent entity within the country of India, he was talking about how villages are cesspools of cruelty, caste prejudice, and communalism. So the kind of things that Mr. Ogada talks about conservation has a lot of parallels to our society, the way we see it, the way we experience it, but we never speak about these things. These are like it's too holy, too sacrosanct to prick at those ideas. The other important thing is many people talk about how we have to speak truth to power. And we always imagine that if you talk about Trump or you talk about Modi, you are actually you're talking truth to the power. But when you actually have that guts to talk to the real powerful people within your community, that's what I believe is what seriously talking truth to power means. And Dr. Ogada seriously challenges the most dominant and the most powerful voices in conservation today. So without further ado, I'll just invite Dr. Ogada and just ask him to take over this whole. And can we have a big round of applause for him?
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and it's good. It's really good to be here. As Raj Kamal said, it was a quickly arranged thing, but one weakness of mine is that I never want to pass up opportunities to talk to students, because I'm rapidly losing hope in my generation of conservationists. So my hope is in you guys who are coming up, and maybe you people will change things. Yeah. So Raj Kamal has quite elaborately stated what the policy issues I've been working on, and just this morning it came home to me. I was watching a plenary talk by Yavendra Dev Jala, a very prominent carnivore ecologist, and he talked about moving people out of tiger reserves to create inviolate spaces, and that the benefit of that is that they are civilizing those people. Now, in India is one of the world's oldest civilizations. It's crazy that in 2019 there's someone who could call some people uncivilized in India, more so an Indian person. So my background is in conservation, and yeah, as Raj Kamal says, it's very much a snapshot of what goes on in wider society, but conservation, I think, brings it out very clearly. So I was talking to students who are doing various projects in conservation biology, and want to get ahead in the field of conservation. So we are told so much about statistical rigor, do replications, statistical significance, confidence intervals, etc., experimental design, but there's very little talk about human rigor, because conservation is a human issue. It's very sad that we still talk about it as if it's biology, as if it's an animal issue. Without us, if their animals were left alone, they would have no problem. The problem comes with the way we interact with them. So the conservation has a sort of kingdom. And I'd like to start by referring to this recent work by Edward Wilson, again, one of the icons of ecological studies, island biogeography, and all that. And he recently came up with this proposal, the half-Earth idea or theory. And the first time I heard of it, I laughed at it as a ludicrous idea. And I still think it's a ludicrous idea. What I didn't imagine is the number of people who'd actually think there's any sense in this. But right now it's built up a lot of some traction. And there's actually a half-Earth project that's supported logistically, financially by organizations including ATREE that's mapping some of these biodiversity hotspots. And I've spoken about this even in the US and said the biggest problem, or the fundamental problem with this, is that we cannot have people in the United States, the global north, talking about conserving half the earth. Because if this ludicrous idea was to happen, it wouldn't be London or New York. It would be tropical Africa where I live. It would be tropical India where we are now. That's where the biodiversity is. So they have no business talking about this. So, but the the threat we face is illustrated by the fact that you find it gaining traction. Even respected outlets like National Geographic start talking about it as if it's actually something sensible. So this shows that conservation still has to change its thinking. We were just talking on the way here and wondering why conservation is stuck somewhere in the early 20th century, while banking, business, tech, communications, everything has changed beyond recognition, even within our lifetimes. Now we talk about protected areas. This is the IUCN definition of protected areas, which is still the functional definition today, even used by the UN, etc. A clearly defined geographical space recognized, dedicated, managed through legal or other effective means. Now the red other effective means, that's where the problem lies. Conservation still remains the area where you can violate human rights, but it's good because it's done for the environment. You can kill someone to save the world, and people will praise you for it. You can kill someone to save rhino, and people will praise you for it. This is what's uncivilized. This is where civilization escapes from us. even though we call ourselves experts and all that. And the fact is, so what's the fundamental problem facing us? The fact is conservation practice is still white. Not just in Kenya where I come from, but in India as well and all over the global south. Conservation is still white. And the reason is white here, okay, in Kenya and many parts of Africa, it's still actually white people. In other parts of the world, it's not so visible because it's the structure that's white. It's the structure that's white. You have white people who are not physically white, but are structurally, intellectually, and spiritually white, who lead our conservation sectors. And why this happens is because the structures of conservation were set up during colonization. And I'm talking particularly about British colonies, former British colonies. And the people who started off these things were Victorian gamekeepers, because colonization really moved along during the Victorian days. Now, Victorian gamekeepers were not technically educated or the most sensible people. They were those who were the roughest and the most cruel, those who are willing to shoot their fellow commoners who are trying to kill pheasants or rabbits so that they could protect the rabbits for the king to shoot for fun. The commoners were shooting to eat, but the king would shoot for recreation. So these were the kind of people. And these are the people who set up conservation. Think of Africa, think of the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Southeast Asia, think of all the British colonies. That's what was exported. And we failed to change that. Back to Kenya. The whiteness of conservation, or the sort of romantic idea of conservation that happens in Kenya, was really cemented by Teddy Roosevelt, former US president, who did a famous safari in Kenya in 1909, where they called it a scientific expedition to collect for the Smithsonian, but he actually just came to indulge his bloodlust because he just shot thousands and thousands of mammals, birds, reptiles, etc., which were brought to the Smithsonian. I mean, if it was scientific, he'd maybe get one leopard, then one baboon and all that, but shot tens of leopards, tens of baboons, tens of rhinos, hundreds of birds, etc. And he was very much celebrated for it. And this also inspired the prestige or need to do sport hunting in Africa. And it inspired also the stratification that happens in tourism and conservation, because a lot of the photos from his legendary tour are similar to this. If you notice that the issue there is that you have long columns of people, white people riding on horses, while the black people are walking on the ground with loads on their backs and shoulders. And this picture is a snapshot of what still informs conservation and tourism in so many parts of Africa. So was this the beginning of conservation? No, it wasn't. It was the beginning of the introduction of Western conservation values and structures. And these are the values and structures from which we've been unable to escape up to this day. So we must look at why is this? Now, the late British philosopher Patrick Wolf puts it very, very clearly that settler colonialism is not an event, it's a structure. It's a structure that persists even after the colonialists have left. They leave us with our own colonialists who are our brothers and sisters, but who are beneficiaries of this structure. And this kind of structure did not exist in our interactions with our environment in the global south. And these structures have destroyed environment and wildlife in the north. If those of you who've been to the UK, you know that even when you're talking of a natural area, you'll go and sit and have a picnic, and you won't even find an ant crawling onto your food. This is a sterile place. If you read about conservation history of the United States, the passenger pigeon existed in tens of millions, and it went extinct. Imagine the commitment you need to shoot pigeons. The commitment to destruction, to shoot pigeons one by one until they're extinct. And you've seen pictures of the destruction of herds of bison, millions of them, in order to subdue the Native Americans. This is the crass Western approach to wildlife. It is something to be used, exploited, extracted. If we look at the situation now, obviously, this is a photo of some old colonial hunter. So you see the pith helmet, we still have those. You still see them here and there, especially people going on safari. The white people had control of, or have not had, control of tourism dollars, philanthropy, donations to the natives, quote unquote. The tourism industry still celebrates that. The most expensive tours in Kenya now are tours. They're actually tours that are organized, and you find the people and camp staff dressed like Karen Blixen those days, the way the staff were dressed those days. People pay $1,000, $1,300 per person per day for those tours. Those are the best, the top class tours, where people are dressed like those ancient days. And so tourism industry revels in this. Now, the other zebra, which appears to be shared by a whole bunch of people, are ignorant public. We've got people in urban centers, just like in India, we have people in urban centers who think wildlife is something out there. It's got nothing to do with me. They don't know what's happening in a wildlife area 50 kilometers away. They don't care. And they watch wildlife on National Geographic TV, even though they're in Nairobi and the movie is made about 200 kilometers from Nairobi. So they're ignorant. Now, they share that gate fees and lease fees and little expenditures on service, the small salaries paid in the service industry. The state authority there use KWS to signify Kenya Wildlife Service. They stand by because they're part of this structure. Remember, they were set up as part of this structure. So they stand by and do nothing. Instead, actually, they enforce the inequality. The state agents actually enforce the unequal structures that exist. So the rest of us who are standing back there wondering what's happening, how do we change this? We need to change the structure. We need to change the structure. We need to change the thinking, the writing, the language, the study, and the way we speak about it. In Kenya, we have a very bad linkage between tourism and conservation practice. And tourism came out of curiosity, exploration, colonization, and oppression, and exploitation. And it's not gone away. And this is not ancient history. As recently as the 1940s, African people were exhibited in zoos in Europe. This is a zoo in Belgium, where they had some people, families from Congo, actually in an exhibit amongst the animals and stuff. In the Bronx Zoo in New York, they had this guy in the chimpanzee exhibit. This was about 1910, 1913 there. And it's only civil rights groups in the United States that got him released from this place. He later on obviously died from depression, etc. To this day, WCS has never formally apologized for this outrage. Neither has the zoo in Belgium. So these things, they've stopped doing it, but no one's apologized for it. If you come back to Kenya, 1961, there was a terrible drought, and you'd find all these white conservation officers trying in vain to revive dying animals by feeding them, giving them water and all that. Yet at the same time, they were violently evicting Maasai people who are trying to get pasture for their livestock from all these places. They were arresting and confiscating all sorts of weapons from local people who are using them to get for subsistence hunting. And the same wildlife department was killing enough elephants that they were actually exporting these elephant feet as waste baskets or to put umbrellas and stuff. They used resources. Instead of helping the local population survive, they used resources to try and irrigate Tsavo National Park. Tsavo National Park is huge. It's the size of an average state in India. So it's this nonsense, this is ridiculous. But they'd rather use that, so just spill that water out there than supply it to the local people. Same time you find local people being arrested. They had killed some gazelle, I think. They were drying the meat and they're being arrested. While at the same time, you have taxidermy shops in Nairobi preparing all these trophies for export for the sport hunters who'd come and killed all these leopards. There's sable antelope there, the critically endangered Hirola antelope in the middle there. So but this is considered normal. These were white people. The others were black people. So it's okay to do this and arrest those others. If you look at the icons, conservation icons in Africa, and I'm sure you people have read about them, they're all white. All of them. Why is there no universally acknowledged conservationist from Africa who's black, even in 2019? It either means it either means no black African cares about wildlife, or it means we've got apartheid going on all these years after we are supposedly independent. Just a point, Jane Goodall, I don't know if any of you have met her. I know she has some programs in India as well. If you meet her personally, she's wonderful. But there's a steel core behind that. Since 1975, she got Tanzania government to do an embargo on tourism in Gombe Stream National Park. And to this day, that is her exclusive use national park. No tourists can use it. No Tanzanians can access that resource because it belongs to Jane Goodall. A few years ago, this must have been just under 10 years ago, one of her staff lost a child who was snatched from the mother by a chimpanzee, which killed and ate the child. This was one of her study animals, a known animal. She suppressed the information about that. It didn't get to the press. I only found out about it because I've got a personal friend who was familiar with the incident. She refused to let Tanzania government do problem animal control, put that chimp down. And instead, her families were moved out of the place. So now they don't stay with their families. But the animal remained. Contrast this with an incident that happened in Cincinnati Zoo a couple of years ago where some child fell into a gorilla enclosure. They shot that gorilla in a few minutes. Not with a dart, but with the live ammunition and killed it. So this shows the sort of thinking that advises animal and conservation management. Another one, Diane Fossey, she worked as a gorilla conservationist in Rwanda. She ran militias that kidnapped, tortured, and killed people suspected of poaching gorillas. I met her she gave a talk in Nairobi when I was a young schoolboy, and we saw her speak. She was one of the most unpleasant people I ever met. But she's still considered an icon of gorilla conservation. People always talk about the great Diane Fossey. Daphne Sheldrick, she passed on last year, hand-raised 160 rescued elephants in an orphanage outside Nairobi. She authored the One Elephant Killed Every 15 Minutes campaign. But hand-raising 160 elephants over 55 years out of a population of about 45,000 elephants is not significant. So she shouldn't be an icon. She's running a petting zoo. This is not conservation. Ian Douglas Hamilton, again, linked an elephant biologist, linked elephant poaching to terrorism. Again, nonsense, absolute nonsense. But that gets the US government to open the checkbooks. Once you convince the US government that this is about terrorism, they literally ask you, how much money do you want? And that's what has happened. The money that's coming to elephant conservation in Africa is mind-boggling. So he was also behind the vilification of China as a driver of poaching. Okay, China has a lot of trade wildlife parts, but as far as ivory, number one trader in ivory in the world is the UK. Number two is the United States. Number three is China. That's the official CITES figures. And obviously, they run tourism businesses as well. Consumptive utilization is a fancy word for slaughtering wildlife. It's inherently racist and elitist across Africa. You will not find a black person sport hunting in Africa. Even if you go on the web, you will not find a picture of a black sport hunter in Africa. We don't do that. There's something in it that is so fundamentally against the African psyche. Whatever is killed in the wild is either because it was threatening a person or it's to eat. Nothing is killed for fun. Who wants to take a risk and waste energy or whatever to kill an animal for fun? So it's a definite it's a definite white supremacist thing. It condemns Africans to conserve by subservience. So you conserve so that someone can kill it for fun, which is ridiculous as a principle. It will lead to loss of lands and resource rights, because the fact is, when people are shooting, you won't graze your goats there and there's bullets flying across. People get moved out of land the moment hunting starts. And that's how Africans lose resource rights. And it's obviously socio-politically unsustainable in Kenya, because you can't keep arresting someone who killed a rabbit or a gazelle to eat when someone else is shooting animals for fun. This is the document that came out earlier this year in Kenya, recommending the resumption of hunting in Kenya. Hunting in Kenya was banned in 1979, but some people have been really pushing. Safari Club International, the Nature Conservancy, and other international bodies that are supposedly doing conservation are been pushing for introduction of hunting. And this is the picture they put on the actual document. And this shows some Maasai guy looking like he wants to go and eat those wildebeest there. And this is completely insulting and wrong. Maasai people don't eat wild animal meat. And we know that the people going to do the hunting are not black people. Certainly not in Africa. But this is to hide real intentions. Sport hunting in Africa looks like this. The biggest, best specimens of any species are the ones that command highest prices. And when you find locals like that who might kill, that's a duiker they've killed, and obviously they seem like they're going to eat every part of it. Maybe each of their families will get a little bit. Such are vilified as poachers, often shot on sight. Rangers don't carry handcuffs. They're not interested in arresting people. People get shot on sight. I mean, even kidnappers and terrorists get arrested. But if you are labeled that word there, poacher, you are liable for summary execution, which is a legal problem. That's the place of Africans in sport hunting in Africa. If you see that guy who's been told, get back there and hide your face. We don't want to see you in this. We don't want to make you seem like you are a valued participant in this. We are not intellectual participants. You even see some photos of these animals being shot, and then they tell villagers, line up here and we'll give you the meat and all these kind of things. This is all a show of white supremacy. This photo is what they pay for, because it shows dominion, and that's what's being sold by people who run sport hunting operations. Now, there's the crisis. Conservation in Africa depends on crisis and a perception of crisis, because for some reason, conservation is the only field that rewards continuous failure. Because someone runs a project and then he gets funding $1 million, he does the stuff, and then at the end his report says, yes, we've done this effort and we've done this, but we still need to do more. We still need to do more research, so we need more money. And so you can't succeed. If you say I've succeeded, the buffaloes are now fine, that means you won't get more money. So we reward continuous failure. And it's the only field where you find a conservationist can say, I've been working to conserve elephants here for the last 50 years, and I'm still struggling. And we think that's a good thing. If someone in, engineering said, I've failed to solve this problem for the last 50 years, they'll tell him, now it's time for you to go home. We don't need you. We don't need you here anymore. In conservation, those who've been doing it for longest without success are the most respected. It's counterintuitive, but that's the truth, isn't it? That's why they get more funding. Now, the maintenance of crisis. This was a false report. Nearly 90 elephants killed for task near Botswana Wildlife Sanctuary. A group says, and the government disputed the claim. The Botswana government took a helicopter and flew up there with the guy and said, point to us where the carcasses are. And there weren't any. But before the government did that, BBC had run this. It was like a crisis. Botswana is losing the battle against poachers, etc. So it was completely false. And that guy lost his permit. This is research permit. I don't know if he's got it back yet. Daphne Sheldrake came up with this. You may have seen it online. One African elephant is killed every 15 minutes. If you do the maths, this is nonsense. It doesn't add up. We know the number of elephants, and we know how long it takes. And because down there they even write one elephant is killed every 15 minutes. At this rate, none will be roaming wild in 2025. That's really close. And who wants to bet with me that we'll have elephants in Kenya in 2025? But these are lies, but it's told so often, and it's told about Africa, and it's told by a white person. So it becomes a truth, even though we all know it isn't. So the issue of poaching, everyone's talking about poaching. US Congress talking about poaching. Prince William, Prince Harry, all these people are talking about poaching. All billionaires in the United States and Europe are getting involved in wildlife conservation, and they don't know what they're doing. In fact, they are driving this problem. I'm just thankful that someone like Jeff Bezos has not gotten interested in wildlife. He'd mess us up. I dread to hear one day maybe Anil Ambani is suddenly interested in wildlife. Please just stay doing what you're doing. Leave stay out of the wildlife sector, because it messes things up. This is a metaphor for a poaching incident. So there's a dead elephant there. Let's assume it's poached. One of the beneficiaries is a poacher, obviously up there. There's another beneficiary there, ivory traders. These are often not the people who poach. They're the ones who smuggle it across borders. Obviously, arms dealers. In a country like Kenya, arms are so tightly controlled that arms and ammunition are very expensive and profitable. Back there, we have the media. They pretend not to be a beneficiary. But stories of a poached elephant or a shot poacher or some victory for conservation, they sell so well. No one asks. Like the thing I showed you about the Botswana incident. Even BBC can report it without verifying. That shows you how much the poaching story sells. The last one is conservationist, the one who looks cute and seems like he's not involved here. If you do the math, there is more money that comes to a conservationist than any of those other people from poaching. They're the ones who get the millions. These others get thousands, hundreds. Conservationists get millions. And this is why conservationists are probably the most interested persons in poaching. If poaching ended, what would they do? They won't become teachers or bankers. Most of them don't have any qualifications to do anything else. So they need to maintain crisis. That's why they put out those reports. Look at organizations. WWF is something like a chimera. It's so different in so many places. I've read about what WWF India is doing, and it's significantly good stuff. But in Africa, WWF is a monster. I cannot find any good in what they're doing in Africa. Human rights violations, etc. So they claim they're saving black rhinos by moving them. Isn't that a bizarre claim for any biologist or any sensible person? Which animal do you save by moving from its home? Even humans. So in Kenya, they have a black rhino program which they finance. And last year, there was a translocation. They translocated 12 rhinos. Hurriedly done, rhinos captured, put in crates, shipped off on a hard release. And they all died, every single one. They were released into a habitat they didn't know. The water reserves there were saline. They couldn't find their way to the fresh water. And they died of thirst, basically, as they drank more and more of the saline water. So why were we translocating them? It's not like we have too many rhinos. So it could be overcrowding. Rhinos are so endangered and rare. It was basically a transfer of power from KWS, the state authority, to WWF, because the new sanctuary was set up by WWF. So they'd get the funding for all rhino conservation, and instead of the funding going to KWS. And that's how business works. Private NGOs, Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, are now getting into it. And they released some rhino translocated into a place called Sera in northern Kenya. This is not a protected area. This is just a communally owned land. So the green area with the solid line there was an area sanctuary they fenced to keep these rhinos in. So because of the security and poaching crisis, when you translocate rhinos to a place, you fence it with electric fencing, you keep everybody out, you have armed guards because the rhinos are in danger, etc. Basically, you grab land. A rhino is the most powerful land grabbing tool in Africa today. If someone gave me a rhino, I could secure 5,000 acres tomorrow and fence it and get a license for guards to guard it. Who cares if the rhino dies later? 6 endangered rhinos were translocated to Chad sometime last year, and shortly after that, 4 of them died. If you know, those of you who know Africa, the climate in South Africa is almost temperate. The climate in Chad is the edge of the Sahara Desert. Who on earth thought a rhino from South Africa is going to survive in Chad? That's nonsense. So there's no science behind this. This is geopolitics. This is resource security. You might find the place the rhinos were translocated to might have oil deposits. But immediately the rhinos are there, someone takes that land. And we have to think closely about these human issues. This was a new technology back 2003. It's called Cyber Tracker. It's GPS basically with little cartoon figures there that could help people. When you see an elephant, you just click on the elephant, etc., etc. But I was at a conference when it was introduced, and the biggest selling point was that you could get local people to help you without having to talk to them, teach them about what you're doing, engage with them. So that was the promotional picture they had. So this shows clear apartheid. We want something that we can use these people without talking to them, without appreciating them, without intellectually engaging them. Yet the San people in Southern Africa could probably find any animal without any electronic help at any time. They're amazing trackers. But this shows the elitism that's visiting conservation. Just this morning, as I told you, I had a scientist call people who live in forests uncivilized. We need to move them out to get them to civilization. And this is the elitism that visits conservation. The root of this malaise is the flawed process that grew conservation out of exploration and exploitation by colonialists. And they set up that structure. It's the structure that's our problem, and people benefit from it. Because if you think back to exploration of Africa, you see these drawings like this when Speke was supposedly exploring Uganda looking for the source of the Nile, while in actual fact was being carried by some guys while reading his book, etc. And today, Uganda still has this kind of operations in tourism. There's a forest where people go to see gorillas, and there's a bit of a walk. So if you can't walk, go see a gorilla in Bronx Zoo or some other place. This is very undignified, but you can see these tourists pay not just for the gorillas, but this is a power trip. This is a power trip. And if you look online, there are people, so many people are so excited about this thing. Not even about the gorillas. You see them taking selfies. I was carried on a sedan chair. That's what excites people, and this is what is selling. This is very undignified. Discovery still happens in Africa. I see discovery in quotes. So you see an article, this was BBC again. A lone bull elephant from Kenya braves Somalia for the first time in 20 years. Why do we think that it went for the first time on March 10th? How do we know it wasn't born in Somalia? How do you know it went alone? How do we know no human being saw it? There are people in Kenya and Somalia. But this was March 10th was basically the first time a white person observed it going. Because it was an elephant collared by Ian Douglas Hamilton. So that glorification. So if Ian Douglas Hamilton saw it, that's the first time. The first time a white person sees it, that's the first time it happened. Just like a white person discovered Mount Kilimanjaro, yet you can see it from 200 kilometers away. White person discovered Lake Victoria with people swimming in it. Discovery, I mean, that was 1890 something. But this is 2016. Hidden lion population discovered in Ethiopia. 100 lions. You know how lions roar and herd for miles. There's over 90 million people in Ethiopia. You'd think somebody has seen these lions. But it was discovered by Hans Bauer and the Oxford Wild Crew. This shows you the flaw, the deep flaw that exists in conservation today, and we must overcome. Culturally, a lot of the best conservation areas are occupied by the Maasai people who are livestock keepers. But repeatedly, conservation has treated them as the problem, vilified them. Yet these are the people who maintain these habitats. They've been here living side by side with these animals for thousands of years. East Africa is known as the cradle of mankind because the earliest human remains are from East Africa. People have been here for millions of years. Yet 2019, we are saying that people are a problem in those rangelands. So natural, when you say natural in East Africa, that natural includes people. But scientists, the same scientists who've discovered the human remains, pretend that this is not an issue. So we reject these people, and they're constantly being harassed and losing their grazing lands. Yet the tourism industry celebrates their culture and wants them to dress in that traditional regalia while serving drinks to tourists. So it's commodification. So we don't want one part of their culture, but we want another part of their culture, and we want to sell it. And why should we ask them to dress like that? It's so disrespectful. Some of these may be costumes that are worn to a wedding or something like that, a ceremony, not worn to go and serve people drinks. And I know a lot of these people, he doesn't dress like that. When he's at home, he's dressed like or with the jeans and t-shirt, whatever. So this is the height of disrespect, and it's the bleeding of tourism into conservation, which is a problem. And the terminology is used, the entrenched prejudice. You see habitat encroachment when a few people are herding the animals and there's some zebra there. People say, oh, this is a problem, the habitat encroachment, yet you see the zebras are all right. There's a whole bunch of other zebras back there. Yet when white people ride horses close to zebra, we call it a riding safari. And it's a wonderful thing. And there's no difference. Yet the zebras seem more curious about these guys than they were about themselves. Sport hunting. We continuously see these triumphant photos of people having killed big, fine elephants. So you wonder, does the one every 15 minutes include this one? Or are those just the poachers? So this is always shown as triumph. Very prominent people do it, including trustees of WWF. Yet when one is killed in conflict, it's called tragedy. It's a dead elephant. It cannot be tragic because this one was killed by black people with a spear and the other one was killed by a white man with a high-powered rifle. You may have seen this photo of a black leopard that appeared in National Geographic sometime early this year. And they said it's the first one seen in Kenya for 100 years. Yet the same animal was photographed by some local guy, a good friend of mine, a few months before that. And he actually told the National Geographic photographer where to put his camera trap to take the other photo. Yet they said the first in 100 years. Again, it's the first by a white person. It wasn't even the first by a white person in 100 years. I've got some white friends who've taken photos of these animals. But it just shows that sells, that romantic notion sells so well that even National Geographic will take it up. Imagery is important. White colonists used these sort of images to glorify themselves years and years ago and show their dominion. White conservationists still use the similar imagery today. This shows There's a power gradient relationship there. It's just that this is the board of Kenya Wildlife Services, and it's just that the black people in that picture are too stupid to realize that they're being used as props. But this is very powerful imagery. Whiteness is the neoliberal approach to conservation, seeing environment as commodities, seeing it as goods that can be traded. And this is a problem. This picture is the Berlin Conference 1886, when some white men sat down to decide how they divide the cake called Africa. We still have it in conservation. We have an organization called Coalition for Private Investment in Conservation, formed 2017. This was their first meeting in Rockefeller Plaza, New York. Again, it's a bunch of white people deciding conservation priorities for Africa. The only difference is that they now have a few women. It's not only men. But the organizations are a frightening coalition of financial interests and capital. Here amongst them, big, powerful, financially powerful organizations like NatureVest and Credit Suisse and European Investment Bank, Finance in Motion, etc. There are more of them. You see even UN organizations involved in this. And these are people turning conservation into a business. And once money comes in, the local people are out. The elites are in, the foreigners are in, and the local people are out. And this is an example. This guy is a prominent member of one of those organizations, and he's already taken up 55,000 acres of land in Kenya. And in this article, he actually said his target is to secure something like 20 million acres across Africa or some crazy thing like that. This is why I say, thank God Jeff Bezos hasn't noticed this stuff. He'd buy us all. Yeah, and we need to guard against this. Neoliberal conservation practice requires violence. It has to be violent. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Colonization was neoliberal. They didn't come to India because they liked India. They wanted, what can we get from India? And they looted untold amounts from India, from Congo, from Kenya, wherever. Colonialism was business. So neoliberal conservation, which is like a colonial project, it requires violence. You have to be violent. So when you find landscapes like that, beautiful as they are with people using them, you bring in white conservationists. They hire locals and arm them and uniform them and task them to keep their brothers and sisters out of certain areas because it's for conservation. This is a very dangerous trend, that it will always be dominated by capital, those who have the most capital. It's not very clear, but this is a project to fence Mount Kenya forest, which is ridiculous even in geographical scale. Not to mention the fact that it's a World Heritage Site. It's a very important part of Kenya's identity. But they're fencing it, and this is the fence up close. The biologist in me is offended by the fragmentation of territory of animals. The human in me is offended by the exclusion of people from their birthright, the forest. They need various resources from the forest: wood, fuel, medicinal plants, beekeeping, all this, and grazing for animals. So this is an organization led by a foreigner. And you find, like on the left there, you see awards given to people for doing this kind of work. Yet at the same time, this award was given and this protest was going on, I think, the day after. Locals are protesting. There's pushback beginning. Locals are protesting about loss of their land to these conservation projects, and it's all going to come down in a short while. They protest Wildlife Conservancy driving them out of the herding grounds. This again is just it was in August. There's extrajudicial killings going on. This was last month. So the edifice is cracking and coming down. And I think the key thing for us conservationists and students is to come up with a new structure, because this one can't last. It's coming down, and we don't want a vacuum after when this comes down. It's not a matter of if, but when. There's violence, resource conflict going on. This guy was shot with an arrow because he was keeping some herdsmen from getting their cattle to water inside a conservancy. He's a South African employed by a conservation organization. Luckily, he survived this, but it shows the potential for violence is always there. There's an organization called Veterans Empowered to Protect African Wildlife. It's sort of the worst people of the US military, defense contractors and those kind. They've now come into conservation. That shows you there's too much money. When someone can leave a job as a US defense contractor and come into conservation, you know there's too much money. But they come in and this is from their website. They actually advertise the fact that they're coming in to perpetrate violence. This is a British group, the Trojan group, that claims to be training people on wildlife management, and just a mercenary group. And again, only training people for work in Africa. We come to India. Kaziranga National Park is a big problem, the loss of life there. But it's so celebrated by people around the world. People love Kaziranga for the fact that poachers or suspected poachers are shot on sight. They think that's wonderful. Even when Prince William came to India, I think they visited Kaziranga with the wife. It's celebrated. But this is not a good thing. We are in the age where we are even making satellites to get to the moon. We have driverless cars and all this. We can't work out how to conserve rhinos without killing people. Conservation is stuck in the far distant past. And it inspires division. Because I've spoken to some friends, including Indian friends, and one of my friends actually shocked me when he said, well, a lot of those people are actually illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. What does it matter? It's a human being, and you're shooting him or her or whoever. But this is what conservation does. It makes Western conservation thinking does. It makes us find it all right to violate our own space and our own people. This is a poster from Wildlife Trust of India, and it was shared with me by a friend of mine called Trishan Simlai. He's studying in Cambridge, but he's an Indian. And he showed that this unfair behavior, and especially the artwork that shows clearly the difference in complexion between the guards and the culprits or suspected culprits. And this shows that the class divide is very subtle, and you see it in the way people talk. And in India, it's further complicated, I'm sure, by the caste system, etc., etc. But conservation celebrates divisions, and we must change conservation to avoid this kind of thing. And this was the paper I invited you to. He wrote it in the Wire, and it's about 2 years old now, but it's a very pertinent paper, whether conservation organizations are complicit in ethnic discrimination, because they are. The violence is not just guns. In Africa, they actually use family planning as a conservation tool. And there's a serious ethical problem here. I mean, family planning is an important thing with regards to human services, health, etc., etc., etc. But the continuous narrative that goes on around the world is that biodiversity is important, biodiverse areas are overpopulated. Everyone says Kenya, Africa, whatever is overpopulated. No one talks about population in Europe, in the UK, density of people there and all that. Yet their consumption patterns are so different. You people as scientists, you know that when you talk about people, it's not about absolute numbers. It's about the footprint. The average American's consumption is nuts. He has 3 big cars. He has an air conditioner. He has washing machine. He has devices to cool and heat his house, and they have no regard for environmental strictures. You go to Qatar, where they just had the Athletics World Cup. They air-conditioned the stadium. Qatar has very few people, but their carbon footprint, it could be close to India. Those of you who've been to Dubai may have known that there's a snow skiing slope somewhere there. Why people do that, I don't know. But no one ever talks about Dubai being a problem for environment because there are few people. So we must change this narrative. And again, it's applied it's applied only to countries in the global south. It's just that a country like China is powerful enough to have their own identity. So you never hear that the 1.4 billion people in China are a danger to panda conservation. You never hear that. Yet you see them actually indulging in family planning. I think the WWF has done some family planning projects around Kaziranga as well. So this is an assault on our sovereignty as nations and people. Deforestation, this is northern Kenya. There's some area where they're doing deforestation of this already arid land, saying they want to plant grass to improve the diversity of grazing animals. The local people who keep livestock, their most resilient livestock is camels and goats, and those need trees. So these are very deliberate efforts to kill their resilience and get them to move away. This is a recent paper that some actually says European colonizers killed so many indigenous Americans that the planet cooled down. I mean, scientifically, it's nonsense. But the ethical question that a paper could actually publish this, an institution like University College London could have one of their faculty write something like this, that a justification for genocide. What machinery did the Native Americans have in 16 something, that was warming the climate? This is nonsense, but it shows that there's a deliberate move to justify suppression and killing of indigenous populations for climate reasons. Again, climate conservation and climate change is getting into the white supremacist narrative. It's getting into racism. A lot of white supremacists in the States who are anti-immigration, they say it's because of environment. So we must really guard against that. Environmentalism is we are developing something called ecofascism. That means people coming in, especially if they're black or brown, are a problem to environment, and that justifies the racism against them. That's why you find countries that have all these industries talk about cows contributing to global warming. This is nonsense. Cows don't contribute anything like cars or industry and all that kind of thing. And it's completely insensitive. In Africa, you have pastoralists who rear livestock to eat, to sell, etc. You have countries in India where there's a lot of belief that cows are sacred animals. Are you suggesting that these countries should get rid of cows? But you realize it's a narrative coming from the global north. They call beef is the new SUV. No, a cow does not consume or produce as much pollution as an SUV. Not ever. So this we must actively oppose this. And the hierarchy of needs, we get stuck in classic conflicts, like human-wildlife conflict, which I studied for my master's in carnivores and livestock. And we see the loss of cows and the loss of wildlife, etc. But now we need to move up to complex conflicts. Because complex conflicts means things like situations like this, where you have a helicopter chasing a herd of elephants, then the little baby that can't keep up gets taken to that orphanage I was showing you. That's actually what was going on here. So people are taking ownership of what is our natural heritage. Outsiders are taking ownership of our natural heritage. These are complex conflicts because that place is celebrated by so many people. The US First Lady and Kenya First Lady. Every VIP who comes to Kenya goes there. The complex conflicts include tourists enjoying themselves in a pool in an arid area where literally less than 5 kilometers away, there's a local person who's struggling, walking a long way with a baby on her back to get a little water for domestic use. That's the complex conflicts that we need to talk about. We rarely see pictures of Africans, Indians, non-white people with wildlife in a peaceful context. Even here in India, there's so much contact with wildlife, but what makes the news is when some villagers beat up a leopard to death, or some people killed an elephant and this kind of thing. The peaceful meetings between people and wildlife never make the media. This is a giraffe which was habituated to people near where I was doing my studies. And shortly after this photo was taken, they decided they want to translocate it to a safer place, and it died on the way. So we lost that giraffe. And this is the thinking around it. This is in Burkina Faso, the village where crocodiles have been sacred totems for years, and people feed them and wash them and play around with them, and they're no danger to anybody. But this rarely meets the press because Africans are meant to be enemies of wildlife, constantly fighting with wildlife. So this doesn't make the press. In Nigeria, you have people who keep hyenas, and they become friendly pets. You see the kid playing around with it and all that. But this never makes the news, and when it does, it is seen as wildlife crime. Those of you who've been to Ethiopia, you'll meet hyenas walking down the street in Addis at night. And people tolerate them, and they're very resilient. They stay close to people, and people celebrate them. I'm lucky enough to live in a part of Kenya where half an hour drive away, I can go and see elephants, take my family there. But people always want to show wildlife in Africa from the tourist's perspective, from a tour van, behind a fence, etc., and they show white people enjoying it. You rarely find, I don't think there's any tourism brochure from Kenya advertising safaris that has used black clients. They just don't show that. Wildlife lives close to people. And if we tolerate it, those of us who are expert, we'll find a way to live with it. It's not without trouble, but we find a way to live with it. This is the hyrax that came, and that's my son there. And he eventually overcame his fear of these animals. Because if you have enough contact, if you let people have contact, people learn how to live with animals. Occasionally, pastoralists pick up young gazelles and just keep them with their goats. The gazelle probably thinks it's a goat now. So they just hang out like that. So these are peaceful sort of coexistence. Likewise there. A couple of years ago, I was here for Nature in Focus, and that was the top award-winning photo. I don't know if any of you have seen the kind of comments on this photo online, like on social media. Horrible racist vitriol. Horrible. And they're accused as savages, and these are civilized people should shoot them all. And these are people chasing elephants. They were not killing the elephants. They were chasing them away from their paddy fields, I think. And that's what I appreciate most about Indian wildlife photographers. They show the real picture. You find pictures like that of a leopard and a car coming down the road. I mean, it shows that there's conflict, there's resource conflict or space conflict, competition rather, but they coexist. A leopard is there living in town where someone is driving down the road. You see pictures like that, and if you put that online, the comments you get from the West is like, why is she holding that animal? They should get out of the gazelle habitat. And this is human encroachment. Some people will even say there's too many humans. And I always tell people, like, anyone who says there's too many humans in any given place, I said, okay, that's good. The first thing you should do is get out of here to start solving the problem. At least we'll have one less if you go. Because we can't treat humans like that. Thinking forward, we need to question conservation. Question people, these icons, question them. Let's form our own definitions from the global south. We need to find new structures within which to publish. We need to find our narrative within which to talk about our natural resources. I really enjoyed the movie Wild Karnataka, but I was a bit discouraged that it was narrated by David Attenborough. I don't like David Attenborough. Because he's the one always showing Africa with no people. So I've got a bit of a problem with it. But it's a beautiful movie that showed the diversity here. Let's partner with the humanities. We need to know the history, religious beliefs, everything everything about the human condition that makes us live well with wildlife, and build it up. We have to have courage, the students. You will be opposed. You will submit papers and people will tell you, this is not good enough. This is not science. You'll submit your thesis and someone will tell you, this religious belief you're talking about here was not in your proposal. You're doing ecology. You must be ready to argue and defend your position robustly, because you are challenging a very old kingdom. We must seek linkages across the global south. Kenya and India both have elephants. But I don't know of any conservation linkages or sharing between Kenya and India, which is unfortunate. And I hope we can start that going forward. Instead, you find people from England coming to tell us about elephants. They don't even have ants. You find we must crumble this structure and to keep this thing going forward. Further on, we must engage. It's all about heritage. It's not about animals. Let's not talk about wildlife conservation. Let's talk about heritage conservation, continuance of heritage. We develop our own standards. Why are people obsessed with increasing wildlife populations? Why would someone want to increase, let's say, populations of elephants in India? Why do we think the current population of elephants in India isn't at the balance where it should be? Because if we increase them high enough, it will mean, are they going to live in our backyards or go to school with our children, this kind of thing? We need space. We must entrench our livelihoods in all this. And this especially to Kenya, they reject pastoralist livelihoods. They want these guys to work in tourist lodges, etc. No, a farmer must continue farming, and we as experts must teach him how to farm sustainably. If a guy produces livestock, teach him how to do that sustainably. We must embrace the people who live close to these animals, like those communities who live in forests, like the Adivasis and those. We must embrace them and learn from them instead of civilizing them, as I heard this morning. That's a very unfortunate standpoint. Tourism should be treated as a byproduct, not a reason for conservation. When we are discussing conservation, tell the tourist guy, could you please excuse us and wait out there? When we finish, we'll come and tell you the product we have for you to sell. Don't tell us you want a place with no people. Don't tell us you want to build your lodge near the spring where there's water, because people are watering their livestock in that spring. Don't tell us you want to build a swimming pool in the arid northern Kenya. The people coming to northern Kenya should be coming to see elephants. If they want to swim, they can go to Mombasa at the coast. There's a whole Indian Ocean there. And that kind of thing. These are the discussions we have to have with tourism to make this whole thing work. I'd just like to thank the people who brought me over, and of course Raj Kamal for inviting me over here. And thank you all for your attention. Do we have time for questions? Or?
I haven't seen the crowd with so much attention on a Friday. Friday is a very busy day because it's the end of the week.
Yeah.
And everyone gets fidgety after half an hour.
Yeah, in Kenya it's the same.
Yeah, but I didn't see anyone moving from this hall. It was complete attention. Thank you so much. Can you get him a glass of water, please?
Yeah, please, thank you.
So, lot to digest, I'm sure. Questions, comments?
Thank you so much for the talk. I was surprised in the beginning, but maybe not anymore, that you know quite a bit about the conservation, the real conservation that happens in India than most conservationists here in India do.
Thank you.
But one question that I had related to something that we do in ATREE, and one of our fellows said about climate change, is when we look at how climate change affects a certain area, she said that it's not just about climate change, but it's about everything change. So
Yes.
there are things that are changing around us, and then there's a layer of climate change.
Yes.
In that context, my question is, in Kenyan society or any city close to, say, conservation reserves,
Yeah.
across, or villages,
Yeah.
there is change that occurs, say the political economy of
Yes.
those regions.
Yes.
So the focus on the way conservation is happening currently in Africa, could it be, say, seen in parallel to a change that is happening in African societies as well? And how do you do conservation then?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Maybe I can take two. Then I can take two at a time. Yeah.
Hi, Mordecai.
Yeah.
So this morning at Dr. Jhala's talk,
Yeah. Oh, you were there.
I was there as well. And I think you missed the last. I noticed that you walked out before the end of it, because he actually ended up contradicting everything he said.
Oh, really?
Because after he painted this wonderful picture of needing inviolate spaces and so on, at the end of it, and this is the real problem. At the end of it is, we have to find ways for people, for humans and wildlife to coexist. After he advocated for the whole talk for an hour.
That's a relief.
Yes, but that's in a nutshell, that is our problem. Conservation in India doesn't have white people guiding it, but it's just as bad. And I made
you have the structure.
And I made this comment yesterday as well to you. I said, we are worse because we are doing this to our own people.
Yeah.
We are following exactly the same thing. In fact, the Indian Forest Service, the Imperial Forest Service, still functions as it is. It is guided by the Wildlife Institute of India, which does most of the research on wildlife conservation, who are, and their philosophy is still very much followed by the same principles that you talked about. It's very disheartening to see that it's still very much the same. The race may be different. The problems are pretty much the same.
Okay. Maybe if I can just address the question, like what's changing? Yeah, there's a lot changing. Consumption patterns are changing, and people need to think more about that, because in Kenya and many other third world countries, economies are growing pretty rapidly, and acquisition of property, cars, etc., is still a symbol of I have made it, I have arrived, I'm successful. The size of your house, you find these really successful family, man and his wife and one kid or two kids, and they've got a massive house, and there are two of them, and they've got 4 cars, or this kind of thing. So consumption patterns, we need to address consumption patterns, see that changes. And then the conservation of climate and change, we need a certain measure of socialism, or we need to limit capitalism. And it's something I sort of academically I've been really grappling with recently, and wondering what's wrong. What's really wrong with conservation practices is actually capitalism. Because we are now seeking funding from capital, from industry, from oil exploration, etc. And what we are doing is we are selling. There's something called Wildlife Conservation Network or something in the States, where you go and give a talk, and based on what you say, you will get a grant. No proposal, nothing. It's that 15 minutes. So what are you selling? When you talk of private investment in conservation, it's not charity, that's investment. What's the return? And that's the most worrying thing, because true conservation, at its heart, needs to be sort of socialist. And somehow I think the success of China, it's said China is it's the second biggest economy in the world, but I think it's the most successful economy in the world today. The West is pretty much crumbling. It's because they found some composite between socialism and capitalism. It's rampant capitalism, but there's a wall. Capitalism reaches there, and the state says no, and that kind of thing. So we have to temper capitalism. And climate change, the worst thing is that climate is a global thing, but you find scientists thinking we can roll back climate change in little islands called parks. No. If the climate of India changes, it doesn't matter if you've conserved a small forest somewhere or in Kenya, like fencing Mount Kenya forest. If the climate changes, that's it. We will not survive. Human beings or biodiversity will not survive climate change in little islands. It's a completely wrong notion. But you see, it's the thinking of wealthy capital has gotten into conservation, thinking you can build your bubble. Someone was telling me today that there are some kids in wealthy families in private schools in India that everything is air conditioned from the house to the car to the school where they are. And when exam comes, people are just taken to different exam centers. And some end up in non-air conditioned schools. And some kids faint. But it means we can't build bubbles. The protected area as a conservation tool is passé. Throw that out the window. We have to find a new and more elegant solution. So we need a little bit of socialism. We need to be a bit of socialism in our thinking. When we are consuming something, you need to think that there's someone downstream who's using this river, so maybe I shouldn't mess it up over here, and that kind of thing. It's socialist by definition. If you're purely capitalist, you will not care what's out there. Pure capitalist is like America first, me first, my house first, that kind of thing. So I think that's what we need to address and examine our thinking in all areas, whether commerce and all that. Because we are also threatened in Kenya. We've got a railway that's gone through Nairobi National Park, and capital just drives things. They buy politicians, they get their things through. However bad the plan is, it gets done because there's so much money behind it, and it's seen as development, and its structure. They see this beautiful railway, and they stoke the egos of politicians, and politicians want to leave legacies. I mean, when you see old legacies, a lot of legacies that exist in the world that we respect most are legacies of thought. I don't think Gandhi built anything, but his legacy is one of thought and principle, etc., etc. But we are moving towards the material world. If you want to leave material legacies, a huge railway across Nairobi National Park, and these are railways that go nowhere and commercially completely unsuccessful, but we are building them. And I've read about challenges in India with a bullet train going through some forest and X number of trees being cut down. And people being moved. The movement of people, for example, there's an identity of me that is attached to the place I come from in Kenya. If you uproot me from that place and move, I lose part of my identity. And this is Western thinking, because if you ask an American that question, where do you come from? Very few Americans can answer it. I was brought up in Tennessee. I went to school. My parents moved to New York, so I went to high school there, and I went to university in California, but now I live in Wisconsin. He doesn't come from anywhere. In the global south, it's different. I'll tell you where I come from. And that's, even though I may not live there now, but I can tell you, I'm from that place. If you uproot, there's so much of culture, memory, language that exists in a place. If you uproot people the way they're doing with the people living in forests now, that's some kind of violence. It's not about you now put him in a nice house, etc., etc. But that's very violent, and we might pay the price in the next generation with some pretty aimless kids who are growing up with identity crisis. Yeah.
So this is probably just a sort of something I'm thinking about, and not probably a question. But when you talk about this colonial history that India shares and countries in Africa share, I mean, it was essentially about poor countries invading rich countries for the resources. It was not rich countries invading poor countries. It was the other way around. And the systemic, problematic systems that they put in place exist even in academia. And I don't come from a conservation background. I work on water and sanitation. And I would love to, for example, work with people in African countries, because I think there is a very clear match in terms of corruption, in terms of colonial past, but there's very little funding, because I think that systemic bias exists even the way we do research. So while all the money and funding comes from Europe, US, UK, there isn't enough resources, even if one wants to do the research across, say, the global south. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on trying to break out of these? I mean, I completely agree that there is need to do more research and collaborate. But do you see a way out of this, considering all the money, in some sense, and systemic power is in the global north, and everything gets done to the global south in some sense?
Yeah. Maybe we can take one more. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, I'm Michael. First, I would like to appreciate your presentation.
Thank
it
you.
was remarkable in one way. I mean, through your wittiness and remarks, you highlighted the seriousness that is there in conservation. It's not exactly a question, but I just wanted to to get a reaction from you regarding last year. There was this reaction around the world regarding the last male northern rhino regarding in Sudan. And you also, I saw your post on Facebook regarding your reaction, but was it also a part of larger white propaganda to attract funds, as you mentioned in your book? So,
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll start with this about the South-South operation. Yeah, these people, these organizations who have sort of built that kingdom. So, and you find some of them are beginning to react by forming country chapters. For example, WWF, now they've formed WWF India, WWF Kenya, and in all these other places. So they're sort of absolving themselves of responsibility at the head office for what's going on there. But about resources, there are resources in our countries. I think the bloc has been mentor. There's significant resources in Kenya that can go towards water conservation and management, and even more available in India. And I think we have significant links. We have significant links between Kenya and India. Obviously, there's a very big sort of Indian diaspora in Kenya. And we have significant links in commerce. There's so much commerce and stuff that goes back and forth, and foundation, etc. Somehow we just neglected the natural resources thing. And the other big link is also people coming for medical treatment. When I say I'm going to India, people say, "Oh, sorry, what's wrong?" I don't know, it's a conference. But so we need to tap the same links. We need to tap the same links between our countries. And certain issues like water, because we have very similar issues. There's a lot of people who use water sort of in situ. Guy who lives here and fetches water from that river there. And the Western thinking is infrastructure. There's people who live in places like Las Vegas. They've got fountains and everything. They have no idea where their water comes from. And it's from like 200 miles away. And they have no idea, and they just waste it. They don't care how they use it. So we need to have that in situ thinking. It's very hard for an American to embrace how to manage water when you're fetching it with a bucket every day. It's very hard for them to get their minds around that. But an Indian will know, and an African will know how to get their mind around that. So we need to tap those linkages that come from the similarity of our circumstances. It can be done. The bloc, I think, is really mental. Right now, there's very little money that comes to us, actual money that comes to us from those Western organizations. The money comes and pays expatriates from there. We don't actually get much. And again, for the millions of dollars that have been spent on conservation, let's say, of elephants in Africa, I don't see what impact it has had. So it's definitely something that can be done. The northern white rhino, it's one of the most amazing myths of modern times. These rhinos were taken from South Sudan, taken to a zoo in the Czech Republic. That zoo fell on hard times, brought the rhinos to Kenya, and they tried breeding them in Kenya. And they died, and all they didn't breed successfully, and the last male died. The northern white rhino This was a contrived extinction. The northern white rhino is not extinct. It still exists in some northern Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan, the grasslands of South Sudan. But these are very dangerous areas with lots of rebel groups. So white people cannot go and observe them. They exist in places too dangerous for white people, so they don't exist. Even if you see on the IUCN red list, it's not listed as extinct. But they've made millions of dollars. Even right now, they say they're running some in vitro fertilization, something which they're doing in Italy, of course. But they're raising a lot of money for it. They even had a Tinder profile that was being used to raise money. Oh, lone male rhino looking for a mate, etc., etc. And they raised a lot of money from it. So yeah, it's very unfortunate because those millions of dollars could have been put towards conserving the rhinos that exist in the wild, not this one that is living in a cage somewhere. I mean, what do you do with it? So you have one male rhino. If you raise $10 million, a male cannot manufacture a baby out of $10 million. So the money is just going to people's pockets. And it's unfortunate that conservation behaves like that in Africa. But yeah, it's become business. It's really become business. They've even made a movie now. The premiere was this week. Yeah.
Thanks for a wonderful
Are they in shock? Yeah.
I was wondering what gives conservation organizations so much leverage in some of these countries. You would imagine that countries like Botswana or Kenya or Uganda, reasonably robust countries with
Yeah.
robust systems. And after some decades of decolonization, you still have a situation where whites can do what they thought through
Yeah.
conservation organizations. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on the politics
Mm.
that gives the conservation of organization the space to
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think it's the structure that they've created, and they've created a structure where, as you see, if you look at all reports from everywhere in the world about, for example, about wildlife crime, you will not see any white person accused of wildlife crime, and they've created that structure around conservation that holds them above reproach. And in Kenya, for example, they're very good at lobbying politically. In Kenya, for example, it's very difficult, I would say impossible, to get a meeting with the president. Very difficult. Maybe it can take me 1 year of talking to people and all that. But white people white conservationists come in, and they can get a meeting with the president. And you see they're getting the president to sign or support something. And it's because they've created a structure. It's sort of the divide and rule structure. If I asked for an appointment with the president of Kenya, for example, who is this Mordecai Ogada? Where does he come from? What is his political position? But some white guy from England comes, there's this guy who's come, he's interested in conserving leopards and all that, and he wants to meet the president doesn't ask any of those questions. They don't care whose son he is. I don't know. He's from England. He has no political impact in Kenya, or mistakenly we think so. And he gets through. And this is how it works. They've built a structure that is very easy for them to negotiate. That's why a lot of the whites who lead conservation in many parts of Kenya they don't actually have a BSc or MSc or any degree in wildlife. But they also have the gift of speaking very confidently about something that he's never been to college to learn about. They do have that gift. And it really helps them negotiate the structure. So the more we discuss about the role of local people, raise the role of local people in conservation, we'll keep pushing that structure down. But yeah, right now it's really powerful. And they lobby. They'll make sure if Prince William comes to India is a huge country with millions of people and issues and places for Prince William to go. But they'll make sure he goes to Kaziranga and takes photos. Kate takes photo with the baby rhino and that. Now, rhino people know they are safe. Because when Prince William went there, he went even with some senior government officials. So when someone said, I'm a rhino conservationist from Kaziranga, he might get access to the minister much easier than any of us here. So it's a very carefully thought out structure, and it's very intricate. Yeah.
Hi, this was such a joy. This is the second time that I am attending your talk, first at SSCS.
Yeah.
Your answer to Venkat's question, I feel it's still very relatable, very similar in India. If you look at our prominent ecologists, they still are the people who hold political power or who come from generations of very powerful ecologists.
Yeah.
Moving out of my PhD, going out into finding postdocs, I see most offers coming from organizations that are led by such powerful leaders, and I really don't want to engage with them, but there is no other option. So I see a lot of students, because there are no opportunities getting into such organizations. So that is a concern. But my question is, or another concern that I want to share with you is slightly different. I feel conservation is also still white in India in the way we have borrowed the language of science. If you had heard some of the talks at SSCS, terms like anthropogenic pressures, wastelands, grazing as a disturbance.
Yeah, wastelands, I heard that.
Yes. So these still persist in the way we do science, and what's concerning for me in terms of this language is also there are these new forms of language coming up with the new ways in which capital is involved in it. For example, this term called voluntary relocation, which I wanted to know if also is there in Kenya in any other form, and then how do you deal with these new terms? And
I think firstly about the first comment about getting into these organizations, and even especially for the students, you will get into these organizations because many times they'll offer you the best options, but go in with your eyes open. The worst thing is going in and thinking, I've come to work for when I was a student, I admired African Wildlife Foundation so much. I thought it was perfect. I wanted to work for them. And I wish someone would have had this sort of conversation with me back then. So go in and certainly work there, but know what's going on and do your little bit to change it. It doesn't happen in a day. The position, the things I've presented to you today, this is 20 years experience. A lot of these hard questions just came to me 4 years ago, really, 4 years ago. The very first time I met straight up discrimination in conservation was when I was doing my master's. It was when my supervisor had hired a helicopter to do radio tracking, and he would not hire a black research assistant. So my research assistant was white. So we went to get in the helicopter, and my research assistant got in, and the pilot refused to take me. Yet I'm the scientist. I'm the guy doing research here. So that's the first time I met. But I thought it was just that person. But later on, you come and see it's systemic. Even when you get to be in a senior position, I got to the position of a director of an NGO, you realize there are things people don't want you to say, things people don't want to hear from you. And there are people, you're expected to take some instructions from some people who never went to university yet. You have a PhD, and that kind of thing. So it will happen, but get in there with your eyes open. So you know these things when you hear it. When you hear voluntary relocation, you have to think who really wants to leave their home, where everything they know and just brought up. These are conservation refugees. And in Kenya we have conservancies. You saw me mention conservancies. Conservancies are very harmful. It's a very harmful term because it's land that belongs to a community and part of it is taken away and sort of, they say, set aside for conservation. These people have lived with elephants and all this all their lives. How do they suddenly decide that, okay, that part of our land will only be for elephants? No one ever voluntarily says that. But they get coerced. They told, we are coming here to help you. And so can you guys form a committee that can deal with that can negotiate with investors. So an entire community is made to elect a chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and all these. So now 5 people are empowered to make a decision on behalf of 20,000 people. And 5 people are very easy to corrupt or to blackmail or do whatever it is. And that's how people are losing their birthright. And that's why the young people now are revolting and shooting people with arrows, because he realizes that his chairman or the committee is completely compromised. So we need to be careful of these new terms. Conservancy is a really, whenever I hear that term conservancy, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. If you hear investment in conservation, conservation is not business, it's a principle. That's a red flag. We need to really look out for this. Yeah, these voluntary relocations. It's other places. This is displacement. This is simple displacement. Some places they call it displacement, other places they call it ethnic cleansing and this kind of thing. And diversity must exist. Remember that biodiversity means nothing without human diversity, cultural diversity, intellectual diversity. So always keep an eye on that, especially when you're looking for mentors. Look for these positions. Some of the most prominent mentors you could have are so rigid in their thinking, and some of them will not. They will not let you write that in your thesis, because it's a kingdom. He's been saying this for the last 30 years, and now his student is coming and saying something different. He will not let you put it there. So keep an eye on, listen out for these words. There's some of these terms that have just come recently. Some of them easements, conservation easements, inviolate zones, protected areas. These are all very worrying terms. But certainly get into these organizations, because that's where you learn this stuff. I would never have known this stuff if I didn't do projects with WCS, with WWF, and projects with Conservation International as well. That's where I learned this stuff. But it took me longer. I think you guys' knowledge, state of knowledge is so much better now, and the exchange of communication is so much better. So go in with your eyes open. Don't leave career choices. Go in with your eyes open.
Thanks a lot. I mean, these are extremely critical and relevant ideas. But I thought you might have suspended critique when you looked at the India case. And I think a couple of questions tried to persuade you to wear the same critical hat when you looked at our cases. For instance, 2 things that you mentioned, Wild Karnataka, you said you liked the film, and except for the fact that it was narrated by David Attenborough.
Yeah.
So the film, by using the term wilderness in the title, is invoking the same sorts of ideas that you have critiqued for an hour in your talk.
True.
Not a single human being in that film.
Yeah.
Although it talks about an entire state, the size, one of the largest states in India.
That's true.
So that's one. The other is about WWF itself, and how you said it might actually be doing good things in India. Although Kaziranga is the main stomping ground of the WWF. And the 2 films, again, made on this that you might have seen from the victims of the WWF recently. And another film by the BBC called Killing Fields of Assam, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken.
I've seen
You've
that.
seen that.
Yes,
so there is as bloody a practice. But that's one part of the question. The other is, when we as people looking at conservation in India rely on literature, we all look at Africa. We all look at literature that's coming from Africa. Rod Newman's work on imposing wilderness, which was Arusha National Park, Dan Brockington's work, Jim Igoe's work, Rosaline Duffy's work on militarization of conservation, and so on. And we don't have the parallels here. And I'm wondering, as a native researcher, how do you engage with that literature? Because all of that literature is by the whites.
Yes.
Interestingly.
Yes.
So what's your sense of, academic appropriation of the revisionist critique that you are now making so eloquently, because it's coming from somebody who lives there, as opposed to
3 decades of highly critical work of the same systems, structures, people, and individuals, and institutions.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, it's true that India suffers from a lot of the same challenges. And again, yeah, I was probably so taken in by the HD photography and the wonderful and all that. Yeah, if you know wild Karnataka itself is a human thing. The state, it's humans. It's not some random thing like wild Asia or something. The engagement with that literature, there's a very strong publishing structure that it's very hard. It's very hard for indigenous Kenyans and of other African countries to get their work published unless they're sort of towing this line. And even African Journal of Ecology, which is by Wiley, it's the editor is the University of York, and the structure is completely the white structure. My experience with the big conservation lie, no publisher would touch it in Kenya. We approached university publishing houses in Yale University, Duke, University of California, Cambridge. No, none of them would touch it. We eventually got it published. It was published in the United States, and we met this publisher in a totally different forum. It was we had no idea he was a publisher. We were just chatting and saying, "There's this book we've written, and we're struggling to get a publisher." I said, "Oh, give me a manuscript," and we gave it to him, and he published it. So the publishing is the big barrier. So if you're looking for literature on Africa, it would be very hard to find something written by indigenous Africans from the indigenous perspective. And that's really unfortunate. That's why I think a very important pillar in this kingdom is the publishing. We need to set new publishing structures. And even the way they edit these publications, indigenous knowledge cannot find its way in there. Someone will tell you, why can't this thing be replicated? There's a gentleman, one of the students met me yesterday and said that there's this publication about use of beehives to keep elephants away from farms in Kenya. I've read this publication and I've tried that in a project, I'm not sure where in India. And he said, it didn't work. So it's a myth. It's actually, it's nonsense. A hungry African elephant gets stung by bees every day as it's browsing on trees. It's ridiculous to think if I put a beehive there, it will not come to eat my maize. But it's published because of the names. If you look at the names behind that, because Ian Douglas Hamilton is there, and Fritz Vollrath, and Lucy King, and all that, there's no African name there. And it's because Africans inherently know, like, bees sting elephants and wild animals every day and doesn't keep them away from anything. So we need to get a new sort of publishing structure across, because it is very difficult to publish anything outside that kingdom, if you can call it that. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get some linkages going and start doing some co-publishing. Yes.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, So if we have to make changes in the conservation arena, we need to engage with stakeholders, and state is one of the major stakeholders.
Yes.
So what has been your experience engaging with state, and how they have taken up findings from your work, and whether you were able to make any impact on ground? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I listened to your talk today.
Thank you.
I have one question which is related to the indigenous people living in and around the national parks. So even when they have some say in whether they can be relocated from their indigenous lands, there are problems as to people stopping their access to getting job opportunities in the department. So at least some 2-3 decades back, the department used to employ a lot of the tribal people from the living near the national parks. But now more and more what's happening is government has introduced that people should be having some qualification, like you should have passed some 10th standard, 12th standard, whatever, to be even a like watcher.
Even a ranger.
Yeah. Watchers go, no, not even the position of a ranger, even to be a watcher or a forest guard, you need to pass that. So what's happening now is that if you look at the representation of these indigenous people in the forest department, it's very low.
It's down.
And they are also not getting their permanent position now. Earlier they used to get it because now they don't they haven't crossed that mark of education. So they're not getting the permanent position or the benefits otherwise they would get.
Yeah.
So given that these people are also at the edge of the forest and not inside the forest, there is a huge problem to their livelihood. Like you cannot collect logs or honey or whatever, or any fruits that they otherwise used to sell. So there is a problem with not giving them access to their livelihood, and you're not giving them their land also.
Yeah.
And these are people who have lived there for so many generations and they are comfortable living there. So when we take all these out of the equation, even when there is no forced or voluntary relocation, how are these people to survive? I just wanted to know how the situation is in African countries, and if we could learn something from there.
Yeah. Okay, maybe let me start with the engagement with state authorities. In Kenya Wildlife Service is very much a product of this structure. So we have qualified people and they know the problems. The biggest problem, people are too scared. Kenya Wildlife Service it's a uniformed sort of like paramilitary organization. So even though they have scientists, it's structured like the police. There's command. So the culture in there does not give much intellectual room for thinking. But even though a lot of them don't say it, I've got a lot of friends who work in there, and they're very supportive of some of the things we are trying to change. So it's moving slowly. It's moving slowly within the institutions, but within the wider sort of public and civil society and communities, there's so much more awareness, and things have changed a lot for the better. Only in the last 3 years or so. Now the issue of employment, it's almost like a deliberate, you want to sort of finish these guys' livelihood, so they just give up and go away. Because something like in forests, especially in forests, in savanna areas where you can see your way around, maybe an outsider can come and learn his way around. But in a forest, if you bring an outsider, you'll bring some forest guards who can even get lost in there. He does not even know his way around the forest. So I think it's really important that even if some of these people don't have qualifications, the forest department must make the effort to train them. First, they're the best protectors. And certainly if one of those guys is the forest guard, there's no way an outsider will ever come in there and do some illegal activities. They can track him and find his way out and all that. So it's very important to engage these people. In Kenya, the Kenya Wildlife Service has made some effort to do that. They always pick some people. When they do the recruitment, they always pick some people from those places and train them. I'd say not enough. They should probably take more, but they're making an effort to pick some people from there. Protection of natural resources or prevention of wildlife crime. If you do not have local people, it will be just violence all the way. You'll never sort out the problem. So I think it's really important for especially like the groups that live in forests. Yeah, I was surprised that some of them are being moved away. I didn't hear any reports that we have recruited some of them to be forest guards. That they should invest time in doing that. Some of them, they should even take them, the young kids, and give them scholarships, etc. Then come back here and you can help us with the management. There's no way around that, and success will be very elusive if they don't recruit local people. That local knowledge is very important.
Last set of discussion now. One question by Ramya and one comment by.
Thank you so much for that deeply
Yeah.
insightful talk. I mean, it was really great. But I wanted to share a bit of a perspective on what I recently saw at a conference. I work on the subject of invasive species and the socio-economic benefits of invasive species, which is counterintuitive anyway. And for me, invasive species, ecosystem services from native species, I mean, these are all xenophobic terms, any which ways to begin with. But at a conference recently, to share it with a larger audience, there was a group from New Zealand that was talking about attacking the problem of invasive species. And so they had a 15-minute presentation on how they uproot invasive species. 6 men that are in a helicopter, and they ride up to the top of the mountain, and one fires a biocontrol agent from a gun, and the other one gets down and hacks the tree, and it's successfully controlling the problem of a tree.
Oh my God.
And a huge round of applause, and I thought to myself, it's 6 men in a helicopter with weapons against a tree.
Yeah.
And it's such a militaristic approach to controlling the problem, and it is not too different from how you talk about it, but it's essentially how we look at this argument also, and that is also deeply a white version,
It's in the
a
psyche.
sanitized version
Yeah.
of how we look at ecosystems also. So, I just thought I wanted to share that.
Yeah. No, you go ahead. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Now, about the militarized sort of approach, it's almost like they're guilt-ridden because, okay, white people brought most of these invasive species to Australia and New Zealand. And there's some program I've watched on TV that it's about quarantine and border controls in New Zealand. You find somebody coming from, maybe from India. There's some of these Indian sweets that are made with milk, and they're taking them away because this thing somehow can bring foot and mouth to New Zealand. This sweet, it's actually, I think it's cooked, but it has some milk products in. And you realize this is obsessive. This is neurosis. Like attacking a tree with a helicopter and firearms, etc. That's sickness. But I think there's some guilt, somehow guilt-ridden about it. Australia has similar things, like they're going through people's bags looking for something that can bring in some disease, etc. I assume there's no disease of any kind in Australia. But you see, this is symptomatic of countries where the settler colonialism, where the colonists settled and became citizens. So that's pretty typical behavior. But there's always that militaristic. It's a war. It's a fight. I don't know where that war and fight comes from. And that's a big flaw because in other countries in the global south, they don't have it. And we don't have it, and the Maoris don't do that. And in Australia, there's a psychological side to it because that it's directly proportional to, I think, how bad the policies of the Aborigine people, towards the Aborigine people are. The most horrible things have been happening to them until the 1980s. I hear some of them and I'm just shocked. But there's that displacement, it's all displacement kind of behavior. The issue of publications, yeah, we must engage and engage robustly. And I've got a very interesting story like that because Oxford Wild Crew actually did a paper on looking at diversity of publications on African lions. They found that basically they were all white men. There were a few white women. But they asked me to participate in that paper. So I put my inputs in the manuscript. And then one of the reviewers came back to me and said that your views are not, I think they said, academically acceptable or something. So the problem just actually appeared in the paper that we were using to address the problem. So he said, can you change this? And I told him, no, I'm not going to change anything. You either take what I've written or leave it out completely. And they asked me to change, and I said, okay, let me do this. I'm removing it, remove my name from the list of authors because I was the only black author. And they said, why do you don't want to be an author? I said, because you're using my name to make this look credible, to make it look good. So I removed my name. And later on, we went through this dialogue nearly 3 weeks long. They were trying to persuade me to have my name there, or even in the acknowledgements. I said, do not have me even in the acknowledgements. If you put my name anywhere on that paper, I'll sue you, unless you're referring to one of my publications. So the problem is they're beginning to realize it's a problem, but they're still struggling with how to deal with it. They're still struggling with how to deal with it. So I think we still must engage more robustly, but that's an indication that things are sort of changing. There's a few people at the top who need to sort of retire or die or exit in some way to create space. I'm sorry to say that, but but it's changing. It's changing, and I think we need to engage robustly, and sometimes we need to do it deliberately. And when we do these papers and submit them, and we say this is a paper about this, it's not by chance that the authors are all from India and Kenya or Kenya, because we are writing about this issue. So we challenge them and tell them, here's our paper. We need you to publish it. And no, we are not going to change it to make it look a bit better. So we need to engage robustly, but we will get there. But from different things I've heard in universities, like in the US and many other forums where I've spoken, the sentiment is changing and people are realizing that there is a problem here. So we are getting there. I'm very encouraged by everything I've heard in the last couple of years. And there are a few publications that have come through. One just got accepted in Society for Conservation Biology, in Journal Conservation Biology. So we just got accepted a couple of days ago with me and some other authors that talks about this. So I'm encouraged, and certainly we should keep at it, but do it deliberately. Don't behave like it's just a coincidence that it's on all Indian authors. Tell them, yeah, we've decided we are giving you an Indian viewpoint. It's not a mistake that we don't have a British author. We decided to do it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this, means I really don't want to close this such a free-flowing discussion, but it's been 2 hours that he has been standing and responding to all the questions and gave this wonderful talk, and it's also lunchtime. Before I wrap it up, I just want to make 2 quick comments that I learned from engaging with him yesterday and today. First thing is this question of what do? We learned and we heard many brutal things happening in the name of conservation. So we all go back to our rooms and start doing exactly what we were doing yesterday or today till we attended this talk. Keep that in mind. Try to engage in an intellectual way, in an ethical way of how you can make changes to your work so that you don't have such similar problems. And you see at what level you have faced similar problems or you have seen similar issues in your work. That is really important thing to take back. Otherwise, it's just one of those talks. We are uncomfortable when we hear, but we just resume to do whatever we have been doing. And the second thing which I remarkably observed is that just like conservation doesn't happen in isolation, whatever you saw here, it's not just happening in conservation. So there is racism in Africa. There is a dominant racism of white versus black going on in this world. There is a caste structure in India always existing. And that affects how you do conservation. So when you say conservation doesn't occur in isolation, all these issues that we have been talking about is also not just in conservation. It's happening all around us. So the point is that keep your eyes open and not just address the problems in the conservation, but also address those problems in our society itself. Because like Sharad always says, you can't have a good conservation system or a good forest without a good society. I think with that we will end it. And huge round of applause for...
Thank you.